Hello, I'm Greg.
Hello, I'm Charlton with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, and today we're going to be talking about fentanyl and its prevalence in our national and local drug supply and what it means for you.
I'm really excited about getting into this module, because I think it's really important to have this discussion about fentanyl. Seeing that, over the last several years, we've seen that the overdose deaths nationwide increasing, with last year exceeding 100,000. And most of those deaths have been related to fentanyl. So this is a really important topic.
I agree, Greg. We've seen the rise of fentanyl in our drug supply. It kind of coincided with the epidemic, with the COVID-19 epidemic, as the natural drugs supplies got interrupted, borders closed, and transportation stopped, things stopped moving. People started, becoming creative and innovative and using other things like fentanyl to substitute, for opiates.
Even a little bit before then, we started seeing fentanyl creep in to the drug supply. And, now, here in 2022, if someone thinks they're going out into the street and scoring heroin, they're sorely mistaken.
And now we've seen very little heroin, and we're seeing that fentanyl is in pills and other drugs, even cocaine and marijuana. We're seeing fentanyl creep up in all different kinds of substances now.
And then another kind of scary thought about it is how we've seen the prescription drugs become counterfeit on the market. Seems like fentanyl is starting to just show up everywhere. Even for people who prefer fentanyl, it ain't no guarantee that you're even getting fentanyl. Other drugs like xylazine, which is a tranquilizer, starting to get mixed in with the fentanyl. So even people who their drug of choice may be an opiate, maybe that's the drug they like is fentanyl, and they think they're getting fentanyl, but their chances are across North Carolina we're seeing more and more and more that the fentanyl supply is half part fentanyl, half part xylazine, which is a tranquilizer. So people aren't even getting that drug. So with the landscape is so murky, people don't even know what they're buying now.
Back in the 70s, there was a term that we used for illicit drugs, and it was called junk.
So, one way that we know that this is going on is because we've been able to collect samples from around the state. Different syringe service programs and harm reduction organizations around the state have been able to collect samples and get those examined through mass spec, which breaks these components all the way down and figures out everything that's in it. Pretty much everything that we've been able to sample has been junk, as you described. It has been a hodgepodge of different drugs put together into a substance and then sold as fentanyl. And so that leads to a question of how does someone even know whether or not that they have just purchased fentanyl or not. I know there's a lot of myths around. You hear people say, oh, well, it smells like vinegar, or it smells like gasoline, or it's gray, or it's purple, or it looks this way, or it looks that way. And they think that just because of the smell, the taste, the texture, or something like that, that they can identify fentanyl just by looking at it or tasting it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Greg, the thing that we now coined or refer to as the opioid crisis, it kind of, as a outreach worker, as a person that works in the recovery field, you kind of feel like the boy with the that put his finger in the dike. You put your finger in one hole to stop that leak, and then another leak comes up. So with fentanyl, with the prevalence of fentanyl, we go through some testing. We issue at harm reduction, we issue out testing materials so that people can know if fentanyl exists in their drug to try to make a decision if some people have come to prefer fentanyl, but if someone is out there trying to get a Percocet, or if they're trying to buy cocaine or methamphetamine, and they want to be sure that fentanyl is not in their supply, we provide fentanyl test scripts so that they can determine if their fentanyl is in their drug supply.
Right, and even if you are able to determine that the substance that you got in front of you contains fentanyl, that isn't going to tell you exactly how potent the fentanyl that you have in front of you is. Just because you were able to conduct a field test and determine that the substance contains fentanyl, that doesn't mean that it's fentanyl, how potent it is, what the cut mix is in it. Like, there's all these other variables that come into the equation, and just getting your dosage wrong potentially can be fatal.
Yes.
So, I think it's important to talk about some harm reduction strategies, some strategies that, a consumer can use to safeguard themselves and mitigate and reduce the risk.
I remember you telling me about a person that was injecting cocaine, and they, actually picked up a cap that was used by somebody else, and it was nothing in the cap apparently, and they put their cocaine in there, injected and overdosed from fentanyl. That's how potent fentanyl can be. Just a residue. People are overdosing over residue. So I mean that's how potent it can be.
I think that's an important point to make, and circling back to that situation that you were talking about, where someone just had a bad wash out of a cap, where they picked up a cap and thought that was their cap, but somebody had used it previously to fix up a shot of fentanyl, and they were fixing up a shot of, if I remember correctly, a shot of methamphetamine, and this person had no tolerance because they weren't an opioid user. And so just the water that hit the side of that cap and mixed in there was enough to be fatal for that person. And so, that is how important this subject really is. And so it's important that people understand how dangerous fentanyl can be. Never alone, never without. You want to talk about either one of those?
Never alone means that, you don't use your drugs without accompaniment of somebody else that can be there to monitor you in case something happens. And never without means that you never use without having some Narcan on hand to make sure that you're able to revive someone or be revived if you have an accident or overdose.
Right. And so sometimes people might be in situations where they don't have someone around that they trust, or someone around that knows that they use, because addiction does thrive in secrecy.
It does.
And so there might be situations where there's no one around that someone can use around, and so in those situations there's a never alone hotline that people can call. And when they call this number, this is a trusted source of harm reductionists that are going to stay on the phone with a person. They'll get, they will get your location, but they will only dispatch 911 to that location if after you ingest, you become non-responsive and they're not able to get you back to the phone after 5 minutes or more. And so that is a way for people to never use alone.
And anyone hearing this, don't be overly skeptical of using these tools and resources that are available to you, because they can be life-saving. Fentanyl, the use of fentanyl, the accidental use of fentanyl, that's the new Russian roulette now, what I'm saying? So every time you're copying and every time you're using, it could be a potentially fatal situation. It's just a spin of the barrel. So go the route of least resistance. Use these tools and resources available so that you can be safe. Test your drugs. Never use alone. Use the hotline.
Right. Go to a trusted source. Go to someone that you know. Go to somewhere that you know that you've been before. That doesn't mean to let your guard down, but that's a strategy that you can use as well. There's also, along with the hotline, there's also some safety apps that are available in like app stores. You can go on there and download those apps onto your phone, and those can be ways that you can never use alone either. And then some more instrumental or practical strategies that you can also use is a technique known as dilution. And so to dilute would mean to take a very small amount of the substance that you're going to use and mix a large component of water with it and inject a sample or a test first, or you can shoot slowly. So you can, shoot that dose, halfway, wait, see how that's going to affect you, and then you can inject the rest. Remember that you can always do more. You can always do more if it's your goal or your objective is to use more. You can always get more, but once it's in you, you can't get it out. And so that's why it's also important to never use alone and to always keep naloxone on hand. And naloxone is easily accessible by accessing syringe service programs throughout the state. Before we close out, I think it's important to maybe give a demonstration on the testing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we should demonstrate how to use the test, what the test look like, and then also appropriately how to read those tests.
So fentanyl rapid response tests are something that someone can easily access through a syringe service program or a local harm reduction. And if you're having difficulties finding one of those, you can go online and just search local harm reduction or syringe service programs and find one that way. And what you're going to ask for is a fentanyl rapid response test. This is a field test that can be done privately in your own home or your vehicle or your motel or in the woods or wherever you may find yourself when you're going to use. And so what it looks like is they typically come in this green package that say rapid response on the front. On the back of the package, it gives you directions as to how to interpret or read the test strip. This is actually, I think of it kind of almost like a pregnancy test that you could do. It functions pretty much the same way. So what you do is you get you a container that's going to hold the substance that you're going to test. Here we're going to use what we call a cap or a cooker, which is a common safe supply that is dispensed through syringe service program. And then you would take the substance that you were going to test. Now this could be a piece of a pill that you suspect may be a counterfeit pill. Perhaps we've noticed that a lot of the Xanaxes and the Percocet 30s that are in the community right now are counterfeit and contain fentanyl. So perhaps you purchased a prescription pill that you think is suspicious, so you might want to shave a little bit of that off or crush a little bit of that and put into your cap, or put a tad bit of the substance in there. And it doesn't take much. So, if you happen to get some sterile waters from your SSP, you could take the sterile water after you pull back your shot out of the cap, squirt your water into the cap, swirl it around, and that wash right there will be enough to test. And so what you would do is open up your rapid response. There is a dipstick that is inside of here. There's an indicator on the bottom that shows it goes into the water. And you just dip it down into the solution, for a few seconds. And then you can lift it out and lay it right on top of your cap or whatever that you have that's holding the solution for you. And then you just let, 10 or 20 seconds go by. And once you're ready to look, you'll see lines will appear on your stick. Now, the back of the rapid response has the actual instructions on how to read it. It'll show you that if your control line comes up, then the substance is positive for fentanyl. If the control and the test line come up, then that would indicate that it's negative. And if only the test line comes up, then that means that the test is invalid and you need to do the test again. Now keep in mind that you can get false positives from this. And just because one test comes back negative doesn't necessarily mean that it's negative. And so you still want to proceed with caution and maybe, even test it again, especially if you have reason to believe that it may contain fentanyl. So this would be a positive, this would be a negative, and then this would indicate that the test is invalid. There are tons of demonstrations like this available on YouTube. So, once you get out, you can always go on YouTube and search fentanyl test and actually watch people go through this process just like we did, just to get you refreshed. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I think that's important information, and I just want to add that if someone's incarcerated or they're coming from a inpatient treatment environment or any situation where they've had a significant reduction in tolerance, safety first. Always be safe. Even if fentanyl and all opioids can be very fatal for your drug use. Never use alone. Never use without. Those are two key things that we always should remember.
The drug supply that's out in the community right now, it's like Charlton said, it's like Russian roulette. You never know what you're going to get. You never know if it's, what you're purchasing is actually what's in the substance that you're getting. So keep that in mind. Utilize strategies such as testing, the never use alone, never use without, dilution, reduction. There are hotlines and apps and a lot of tools and strategies at your disposal. Please keep that in mind because, as Charlton just said, coming home from an incarceration, you are at a very high risk of overdose.